I work at a store that sells movies, and a lot of the movies in our Blu-ray box are some of the Disney remakes. And when I was looking through them the other day, a thought occurred to me. Some of these remakes are really good, and some of them are pretty bad. So what is it that makes the good ones good, and what is it that makes the bad ones bad? And then I realized that this question can be applied to remakes in general, not just the Disney ones. So then, when is a remake a good idea? Well, in my opinion, the best of the Disney remakes seem to be the ones that change the most from the original source material, because those are the ones that seem the most original and fresh despite being a remake. So then I thought to myself, if being original is what makes a good remake, then why bother making remakes? Because remakes inherently are unoriginal, by definition, as a remake. But at the same time, I think it's wrong to assume that remakes are never a good idea, because despite being unoriginal, there are still some pretty good remakes out there, some of which are even better than the originals. So the conclusion I came to is that a remake is a good idea when you can add something to what the original was, improve something from the original, or take the original concept and kind of take it in a new direction. For example, I think one of the better Disney remakes is the Alice in Wonderland remake, being that this is the one that strays the most from the original source material, making it the most original remake in this lineup. It takes a story that we already know, but twists it into sort of a dark Game of Thrones-esque universe where bad things happen. A lot of that can be credited to Tim Burton, who's both the director of the movie and my favorite movie director of all time. Maleficent was another Disney remake that actually was pretty good, once again taking a story that we already know and adding some more depth to it. By turning the villain into the main character, it gives us more insight on what may have been going on in that universe, which makes for a pretty interesting movie. So these are both good examples of taking the story in a new direction. An example of trying to improve something from the original is 2005's remake of the 1933 classic King Kong. Lord of the Rings director Peter Jackson wanted to take King Kong into the modern age, retelling the original story with more modernized effects to try to appeal to a wider audience. And although I don't believe it's quite as good as the original classic, it is still a really good movie and a really great remake. It makes the movie longer and it adds newer effects so that we can see what it might look like if this stuff really happened. And even though these effects haven't aged really well now, for the time, they were fantastic, which, again, the same can be said about the original. Though I do prefer the dated look of the 30s effects over the dated look of the 2005 effects, because the dated 30s effects really look like a classic movie, like it's supposed to be dated. It was a long time ago, whereas 2005 CGI just looks like bad CGI. It usually looks fine, it's just the green screen effects that don't look that good most of the time. That being said, this is a perfect example of a remake that tries to improve on something from the original. It tries to improve on the effects, even though, really in my opinion, you can't improve the original King Kong. 1933's King Kong is easily the most influential movie of all time. But still, this is a good remake, and it was made for a reason. As for a remake that exists to add something to the original, Zack Snyder's Justice League. A movie that literally only exists for that purpose. For anyone who doesn't know, Zack Snyder was directing Justice League when his daughter committed suicide, so obviously he stepped away from the project to go be with his family. But then the movie was passed over to Joss Whedon, and it all kind of fell apart after that. Joss Whedon's Justice League wasn't really a bad movie, but it wasn't the movie we were promised, and it wasn't the movie anyone wanted it to be. Rumors started to surface that there was a version of the Justice League that was 4 hours long that Zack Snyder had actually finished. The rumor was that Zack Snyder didn't just step away from Justice League, he finished it, and then passed it to Joss Whedon to edit it. And that's how we ended up with the version of Justice League that we got in theaters. So naturally, people were demanding for Warner Brothers to release the Zack Snyder cut of the movie. Warner Brothers claimed that this movie never actually existed, and that the whole thing was just a big internet lie. Simply a rumor that got out of hand. But then Jason Momoa, one of the stars of the movie, claimed that he knew for a fact that the Snyder Cut existed. Eventually, Warner Brothers admitted that yes, they did have clips from an existing Zack Snyder version of Justice League, but that the movie had never actually been finished, and that a lot of the clips had gone missing anyways. But fans still demanded that a Zack Snyder cut of the movie be released, as it was originally his project. So Warner Brothers called Zack Snyder, and they linked up with HBO Max, and they reshot a bunch of scenes, and finally, earlier this year, released the Justice League on HBO Max, fully restored the way Zack Snyder had originally wanted it. The movie was in fact 4 hours long, but it was pretty good, and it did add a lot of context to things that didn't really make sense in the theatrically released version, making this a prime example of a remake being done simply to add to the original. And I know you could technically debate whether or not this is actually a remake, but it's a movie that previously existed that had a bunch of things reshot and filmed again even though they had already been shot and filmed, and then it was re-released. So that kind of sounds like a remake to me. And an example of a remake that was better than the original. So those are 3 examples of when a remake is a pretty good idea. But what happens when a remake is a bad idea? Well, you get stuck with this abomination. Commonly viewed as the worst remake of all time, The Lion King 2019 sucks. It's a poor man's version of the original Lion King, and it's way longer. If you want to sit through a 2.5-hour version of The Lion King that has none of the original fun and charm of The Lion King, be my guest and watch this movie. This is an example of a remake that has no reason to exist because nothing about this movie is different from the original. I mean, obviously aside from the way the movie looks. And I know I praised the 2005 version of King Kong for making it look different from the original, but here's the difference. King Kong was a movie that was supposed to look realistic. The effects were always supposed to look genuine. Like a giant ape was fighting monsters and T-Rexes. If you watch the original Lion King though, it's pretty clear nothing about it is supposed to look real. It's a cartoon. And it's not a realistic looking cartoon either. It's a 1990s Disney movie. It's not supposed to look realistic. So remaking it simply to update the effects isn't a valid reason to remake it. This is a true example of a remake that has no reason to exist. It doesn't add anything to the original. It doesn't improve anything to the original. It doesn't take it in a different direction than the original. In fact, the opening scene is a shot-by-shot remake of the original. It's a blatant cash grab where the only people working on it that had any passion for it were the animators. And I do give them a lot of credit because clearly they were the only people working on this movie who were actually trying. Except for in that one scene where they perform Do You Feel the Love Tonight in the middle of the afternoon. What was with that? I guess another reason you might want to remake a movie is if the movie is based on a book. But I guess in that situation it's not technically a remake, it's a new adaptation of that book. Because the word remake kind of implies that the source material for your movie is another movie. I wouldn't consider 2017's version of It to be a remake of the 1990 version. It's not. It's just a completely different movie that happens to be based on the same book. And I think books can be adapted really as many times as you want, because some people are going to want to stay as close to the source material as possible, and others are going to want to stray from the source material and see what they can come up with on their own with the same plot elements. I didn't like the 2018 version of Watership Down, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't be willing to watch another version of Watership Down. I like the 70s version, and I'd like to see Watership Down keep getting adaptations. I want to see a photorealistic version of Watership Down, because unlike The Lion King, Watership Down takes itself very seriously, and it has a lot of moments that would be kind of interesting to see in live action. A PG-13 photorealistic version of Watership Down could actually adapt more from the book than any of the animated versions so far have. But anyways, these are all just my opinions on remakes, and I really have nothing else to say, so have a good day, I guess.